you know, so basically, international funding, local funding, donor funding, but also corporate funding that can actually be given as part of CSI, social investment. So it's wonderful to have this incredible panel. In fact, most of these people really don't need any introduction at all. But let's go ahead. So we have got Nadine Hoffman. She is the Deputy Executive Director of the International Women's Media Foundation. So Nadine, really lovely to have you here. You're in Spain, I think, at the moment, which is great.
It's not the US, so it is great.
Good. And we will certainly touch on issues around the US and the difficulties now with fundraising because of that. Then we also have Anton Harber. Anton Harber, I don't think needs any introduction, particularly in a South African environment, but also internationally. Writer, journalist, columnist, activist, journalist, education, etc., and also director of the Henry Nxumalo Foundation, which I think is particularly critical for this call, which is a donor institution. And then we've got Bongiwe Tutu, project coordinator for the Africa-China project, reporting project from the Wits Centre for Journalism. So yeah, a really great group of people to talk about this very important topic. And colleagues, what we want to do is to be very, very practical about, literally giving you tips around what to do, what to look out for. And we're going to have I'm going to let each one of the speakers speak for 5 to 8 minutes, and then we are going to have a discussion. I'm going to ask some of the speakers a couple of questions, and then we're going to open up for you to really play an important role and ask your very practical questions. So what I would like to do is to actually start off with Nadine. I would like us to start with the international environment. And I would like you to help us with insights for applying for international grants. And of course, navigating this new, very hostile environment which we find ourselves in. And maybe just to make a comment, colleagues, because AIP members were part of the MVA, the media... I think it's called the Media Viability Accelerator, and literally that entire program has been closed down because of lack of US funding, and we basically put a huge amount of effort and time into that. So yeah, over to you, Nadine, for your initial comments on the new environment that we find ourselves in and what to do about it. Thanks, Nadine.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Paula, for organizing this conversation. As you said, I'm Nadine Hoffman with the International Women's Media Foundation. Our mission is to support women and non-binary journalists around the world, although we do also have opportunities for journalists of all genders. And the work that we do does include grant making, it includes safety, and it includes a range of awards that we give every year. I do want to start by just acknowledging the moment, Kate, that you alluded to that we're in, which is, I think, a really unprecedented one, and specifically to say that I don't think that I have any of the answers about where this is going, because it is moving so quickly. So the political situation in the U.S. I know is having a huge impact right now on the international funding landscape, particularly for independent media. One of the projects that we're running this year is in Ukraine, and I just came back from there about a month ago, and we learned that almost 90% of international media in Ukraine had at least some funding from U.S. government sources that was cut. So that just, you can imagine the huge fallout that has had for the ability of Ukrainian journalists to be able to tell stories that are really important. Well, so just to say, we know that the funding landscape is extremely precarious right now, and to also start by setting that expectation that as U.S. government money has gone away, it has also made journalism philanthropy be in a moment of extreme stress, so that big international funders are now receiving, just so many more requests for support that from the money that went away. So I do think it's a pretty tough environment right now for fundraising, but I don't want to be a negative. I want us to have a great conversation about constructive ways that we can think about securing funding. So I'm going to share some lessons learned from the IWMF's perspective, having run grant making initiatives over well over a decade. And some of these are pretty basic, so I apologize if this is material that might be very familiar to you, but just to start from the beginning, the first thing that I always say that people need to do is to read the instructions for the application and the parameters for the opportunity that you're pitching for. We often receive requests that are not eligible, that we do not fund, that the journalists do not meet the eligibility criteria. So please just start by making sure you have a basic alignment with the funder that you're going out to. And if you don't meet the requirements, then it's really, don't waste your time. So just make sure you're finding, the right fit and get a sense of what funders are going to be really interested in the projects that you're pitching. And I'm also speaking from a perspective of seeking funding for your reporting, for stories, not so much seeking funding for, starting up a media outlet. Some more really basic advice is just to make sure that you're actually pitching a story and not a topic. This is something that we often also see in applications, is the pitch is very broad and hasn't sort of drilled down to the level of specificity that makes it stand out from the batch. We want to be curious about your pitch. We want to, care about learning more. And of course, international funders all have different criteria, but as the IWMF, we do fund both local and international reporting. But if it is a local story, it's always interesting for us to know how that might have broader implications or be relevant to a wider audience beyond your own community. We always tell applicants that they should be ambitious, but also realistic in their pitches. We do want to see big ideas, but we also need to believe that you can accomplish what you proposed, both within the budget and on deadline. Sometimes we'll receive a pitch that says, "Oh, I'm going to visit, these 6 locations, and I'm going to interview these, 30 people, and I'm going to do this on a budget of $2,000, or something that just doesn't seem like it would be really feasible to do. So making sure that what you're selling us is something that is actually realistic, and that you can accomplish. At the IWMF, we're also interested in underreported stories, so stories that have a fresh angle, or something that is a little bit different than what's already been covered very widely. And so it's important to tell us why your reporting is new, fresh, different from existing coverage, but also what makes you uniquely positioned to do that reporting. So telling us a little bit about your track record or your background or your access, what makes you sort of stand out from the crowd. We always want to understand who the audience is, and if possible, we also love to see a letter of commitment or an intent to publish from an editor, simply because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, the reporting that we fund finds a home and finds an audience. If you don't have a letter of support from an editor or media outlet, we're always also looking to see your track record of reporting as an independent journalist, where you've published before, and that you are able to pitch in place. Stories. We also don't like to dig. This is not to say that grant makers are lazy, but if by the 4th paragraph I can't really figure out what the project is, it's probably not going to get too much further to advance to our selection committee. So you should definitely be able to communicate your idea in a couple of clear sentences that, as we all know as journalists, should be the lead of the pitch. Definitely, keep it concise, keep it very, very specific, and let us understand what it is you're trying to do. I mentioned budget before, but it is such a key part. And when our selection committees meet, and Paula knows as somebody who's been a part of selecting a lot of the grants that we've made over the years, we really dig in on the budget. And specifically, we want to see that you have thought through what you need money to do and that it's reflected in a very detailed way. That means that we want to see what you're spending for your travel, lodging, translation, production, insurance, any sort of safety support that you might need. The narrative is clearly important, but the budget shows us sort of the plan for how you're going to do it. So we do look at those, and if we have questions, we will definitely come back and ask. And also if there's just like sort of a mystery, like $10,000, like for reporting costs, that's going to make us have more questions for you. So those are some of the practical things. I do want to then just speak sort of more broadly, because it is such a competitive landscape to get journalism funding these days. And I say that as someone who sits in two seats. We are grant making, but we are also always seeking support to continue our own work. So we are really well aware that this is a very competitive landscape, and only a small percentage of the pitches that we receive or that we're pitching to funders do successfully get funded. And so just to say, this is a long and persistence game. We really encourage folks not to be put off by getting a rejection or not being funded the first time, and really just that you have to try to ask for feedback if you can, to see if you can get someone to review your application, a mentor, someone like Paula, to give you feedback on your pitch, so that it can be stronger for next time. And even possibly asking if there are the funder that passed on your project, if they could recommend other sources that might be interested. For example, right now we're looking sort of beyond the usual suspects that fund journalism to more topic-specific funders. And I know there is right now a lot of funding out there for reporting on climate change, reporting on reproductive rights. So thinking about how you might pitch someone that's beyond the usual suspects. So it is important to know the funding landscape. And also, I would say it's a great idea just to look at the websites of funders. If you go to our website, if you go to our community page, you can see all the reporting that we've supported. It's all there. And it's a good idea just to have a look around and see the kinds of stories that are getting funded, so you can think about how to frame the pitches that you're making in the future. I do think that networking is a huge part of being able to successfully fundraise for your projects, and just building your network of support by going to journalism convenings. There are often funders there. They can be really hard to find. They often don't identify themselves. But just showing up in the spaces where there is the potential for support and talking to everybody, just, really putting yourself out there and making those contacts, because you never know who's going to be able to support you in the future. And with that, I think I'm going to pause here. I don't know if I've hit my 5 minutes yet, but I'd love to turn it back to you, Kate, and then have a conversation with everybody later.
Fantastic, and thanks so much, Nadine. I think that's super practical. And just to sort of say, just one point that stood out for me, which I think is very true for myself, is this whole thing about being super persistent. Not giving up, getting that feedback, going back and asking again, and not just turning away and thinking, okay, that's not possible. So thank you for that. I then want to turn to Bongiwe. Bongiwe, I'd love for you to again give us a very practical input. From the South African perspective, but also obviously you can look at some of the international issues as well. Focus on storytelling grants, what funders look for, what things stand out, and also I think also an interesting one as well, if you want to, I'd love you to do that, just touching on some of the pitfalls, some of the things that you shouldn't do. Thanks Bongiwe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you, Paula, for inviting me to this webinar. It really comes at a crucial time where journalism is really under the threat of funding and support. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel and contributing and providing some takeaways for the attendees that are joining us here today. Okay, wonderful. So before I begin, I'm just going to speak briefly about the Africa-China reporting project at the Wits Centre for Journalism, and then I'll go into proposal writing. The presentation I prepared is quite lengthy, but we will share this to the attendees. I won't go over each of the slides that you will see. So I'm just going to go to the very beginning to speak briefly about the Africa-China reporting project. I think we're stuck there. Great. Okay, so the Africa-China Reporting Project, we are based at the Wits Centre for Journalism, as I've already mentioned, at the University of the Witwatersrand, also known as Wits University. And the project has been in operation since 2009, and that was coincidentally the same year which China surpassed the United States as Africa's largest trading partner. So the project aims to improve the quality of reporting on not only Africa-China relations, but also issues which are impacting the African continent. And this is by providing facilitation and capacity building for journalists and researchers in the country, in the continent, as well as in other parts of the world. And this is done through the provision of reporting grants, through skills training workshops, through reporting resources and other opportunities to journalists and researchers. And within this aim, the project has amplified Africa's perspectives in order to enhance its development. And over the years, the project has shaped into a networking hub for professionals from over 33 African countries and over 20 countries internationally. And so these aspects are detailed throughout the presentation, and I will just be jumping through. This will be available for attendees afterwards. And so, as mentioned, the project is just one of the offerings that are provided within the Wits Centre for Journalism. So it is seated within this umbrella of a comprehensive and dynamic framework for our journalism scholars as well as professionals. So these are the contents of my presentation, and I was speaking briefly about the project, and I'll be jumping over the training initiatives and going into writing a winning proposal, as well as some resources for journalists in accessing funding, and as well as networking platforms. So these are the broader issues that the project has facilitated and supported over the years within reporting grants and training initiatives. And these are topics which span over wildlife poaching and trafficking, climate change and the energy crisis, which was previously mentioned by Nadine as a very topical issue in our time, as well as more broader topics around critical minerals, the energy transition, topics related to local perspectives on the impacts of FOCAC, the BRI, the GDI, as well as some comparative reporting on the US and China engagements in Africa and China's Southeast Asia experiences with China. And we've had training workshops which have been held in a number of countries in the continent, which include South Africa, Nigeria, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Tunisia, as well as in China and Belgium. And we've seen impact and supported impact, which has been, and reporting, which has been told in English, French, Mandarin, and as well as Arabic. So over the years, the project has disbursed and awarded over 200 reporting grants, and as well as training to over 600 journalists in South Africa, in the countries which I've already mentioned. And it has grown into a network for journalists and researchers around Africa and China, as well as a networking hub for policymakers, business people, journalists, academia, and other organizations. The engagements that we've held have been within the Anglophone Africa community, as well as Francophone Africa and North Africa, and as well as reporting that has been conducted in English, French, Chinese, and Arabic. So these are the countries which the project has realized impact within the continent, as well as globally within the Asia region and the rest of the world. And we'll open this up for discussion at the end of our presentations. So briefly onto some of the challenges and experiences that we have noted from journalists that we have trained, as well as journalists and researchers who have applied for opportunities that have been provided and facilitated by the Africa-China Reporting Project. This slide relates to a journal which was published. The image is on the right-hand side, and this reflects on some of the challenges that journalists have experienced over their reporting on China-Africa relations. And the study is between 2010 and 2017, with respondents from over 14 countries in the continent, as well as in the UK, China, and the USA. Some of the challenges that are reflected in the study, as well as in the experiences of the Africa-China Reporting Project, relates to the lack of adequate knowledge and understanding on Africa-China relations. And we've seen within proposals that are even submitted for reporting grants that journalists submit, there's still some limitations that journalists present in their understanding of the dynamic and complex nature of China's engagements in Africa. There's also a lack of community by community reports on ground level perspectives, on African perspectives, and local stories that are told from that perspective are quite lacking, as we find that most proposals will try to aim for the bigger or high level kind of representation, and the story of the person on the ground is often lacking. And what is also evident in the challenges is the prevailing and dominating narratives and biases on China and Africa. And I've already reflected this as it speaks to the lack of adequate knowledge and understanding of Africa-China relations. And so to the aim of this webinar, there is the main challenge of limited resources, funding, support to media professionals and researchers. And that also affects the sustainability crisis, which is facing journalism and society. To add to this, there's limited access to information with growing paywalls and subscription sites. And also evident is online and field reporting challenges. And so some of the responses that the project has made to the challenges that have been experienced by the journalists and as well as researchers is the provision of capacity building, training workshops and information resources and opportunities, the provision of reporting grants and research grants, providing educational tools and resources, providing media sustainability for journalism, businesses and education, and focusing on Africa and African and global South perspectives and professionals in order to enhance the development of the continent. And also the effective engagement and support of the ACRP network for a more enhanced impact. All right, so this is the greater part of my presentation that I'm going to run over to get to the reporting proposal writing. And happy to discuss these during the Q&A session. So in writing a winning reporting proposal, we have some guidelines which are provided on the Africa China Reporting Project website, and that the document on the right-hand side is a captured image from our website detailing what are the expectations of a strong proposal. So what the project requires for a strong reporting grant proposal is that it is relevant, that it speaks to the current issues that are affecting society, that it's focused. Nadine has already spoken over the element of a focused proposal. And that it is detailed and thorough. So by that, we don't mean that it must be 10 pages, but it must be very informative, and it must be easy to understand what it is that you are aiming to investigate. Nadine also touched on story versus issue, and it's very important to reflect on the story that you want to tell in the investigation or the report that you will be conducting. As well, the proposal needs to have a very clear methodology. And so you need to indicate how you will be going about conducting your investigation and your report step by step. And this also speaks to a justifiable budget. So in the proposals that are submitted, the methodology that is presented is assessed against the budget that is presented. And it's very important that these two speak to each other. And so also what is required is that you provide your supporting documents and any other requests or requirements that are given by the funder. And these are to justify and support your claim as to why you would be the most suitable candidate for the reporting grant. So speaking more detailed on what is required in the proposal, you need to show a targeted audience and a protagonist or protagonists to the report that you are aiming to conduct. And it is very important that your proposal is very well researched. Often researchers and journalists submit on the assumption that whatever topic they're proposing to investigate is already known. And so the assumption is that the reviewer will have a prior understanding and a prior knowledge to what is being proposed. So no matter how obvious a topic or issue seems, it is always important to have a very well-researched proposal where you outline and you show the resources and you reference where you have obtained the information that is finding or founding on the objectives of your report. And it's also important to have a very logically written proposal. At times, we find that some proposals seem to have been rushed in how they are prepared and are not quite logically written. So it is important because that is the first that's the first impression that you create upon your reviewers. And what's also is very important on the practical side of your reporting, your investigation, your fieldwork is whether your proposed investigation is feasible, where we ask, is it actually doable? Nadine did touch about being ambitious and aiming big. We do promote that, but at the center of this, you need to prove and show that the investigation being proposed is feasible, that it is doable, that you will be able to go onto the field and access the sources that you are aiming to speak to. You know, at times we've had proposals where I'll make a very exaggerated example, but if a proposal would come and say that they're going to interview President Xi Jinping, and then within your fieldwork, you find that you're having challenges accessing President Xi Jinping. I think that would be an example of a very ambitious aim for your proposal. So you need to be very practical and ask yourself, is this feasible? And you need to show that you already have access to the sources that you will be speaking to, that will be informing the investigation and the report that you're conducting. Within this, you need to also declare the risks that you might encounter as you go onto the field, as well as the media house that you're going to be publishing with, if there are ways that they will be showing, that they will be providing you support in mitigating some of the risks that you will encounter on the field. It is also important to declare your positionality. Sometimes researchers and journalists will propose a topic that is, for example, of a company that they're currently working in, or that they've previously worked in. So it's very important to declare and own to those that positionality that might impact the sort of outcome of the report or investigation conducted. I've already spoken on the methodology that speaks to the budget, which is also under the review of whether the proposal is feasible. So in essence, the proposal has to be clearly and fully presented. So if there are any other tools that you'll be using in telling your story, such as digital technology, if you're going to be using AI tools, data storage, innovative aspects such as drone technology, things like that, you have to declare in your proposal that you'll be using these kinds of tools in your storytelling. And most importantly, the reporting proposals have to be met on deadline. Often there will be a specific call where there's a period in which you can submit proposals. And every time we have call, and even though we set a deadline, we still have about 10 to 20 more applications that are received after the deadline. It's a terrible habit of our professionals, but it is important to submit on deadline, and this also contributes to the impression that you create to the reviewers of the reporting proposal. Then lastly, to some resources on grant-making organizations, other grant-making organizations and institutions that journalists can access to seek funding, and these are listed on the left-hand side of the screen. And these include Oxpeckers, Africa Uncensored, the CCIJ, Henry Nxumalo Foundation, which Anton Harber will speak to, and other global organizations such as Dialogue Earth, China Global South Project, the Africa-China Reporting Project, and as well as the Chinese in Africa and Africans in China Research Network. And on the right-hand side are some of the tools which are available on our website on how to prepare a good proposal, where these guidelines are given in detail, and you can always access these within this presentation and from our website. And then lastly, these are some organizations, global organizations that you can look out for, which can inform some data and knowledge that might be contributing to closing the gap which exists, particularly within Africa-China relations. So in Africa-China organizations, there are institutions such as Aid Data, the Global Development Policy Center, which has a weekly newsletter on very founded research, deeply founded research, well-researched databases on China's engagements in Africa, as well as other organizations such as the China-Africa Research Initiative, CARI, also think tank and research organizations such as the IGD, SIRE, which would help inform your understanding on not only Africa-China relations, but also Africa's engagements within the larger geopolitics. And if you're focusing on thematic areas such as climate and environment, There's the Green Finance and Development Center, as well as Global China House. And then within the global African journalism and research networks that you can be a part of, which are often putting out calls for grants, as well as events where you can participate and build your skills and knowledge. And these include the Global Investigative Journalism Network, the GIJN, the African Investigative Journalism Conference, which is held at the Wits Centre by the Wits Centre for Journalism at Wits University annually. The Chinese in Africa, Africans in China Research Network, the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism, CCIJ, the Global Forum for Media Development, as well as the International Women's Media Foundation. And then on the right-hand side are some investigative journalism hubs in Africa that we have previously worked with. You can also reach out to these investigative hubs if you want to pitch a story that you would like to conduct under their organizations. And then lastly, some popular media houses in Africa and China reporting that you can also reach out to within proposals that you are aiming to conduct. And I think then I'm very well over time. Thank you so much, Kate, for your generosity. And thank you to attendees for your attention. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Bongiwe. It was such a rich presentation with so many resources and everything. You absolutely needed those extra minutes, and I was glad to give them to you.
Thank you.
So just to say that one particular point I just want to pick up on your presentation, and I mean I know it's just it's a small point, but I think absolutely important, and just your time one, getting it in on deadline, because I have seen so many times with AIP, with myself, missing that deadline, and you might have done the most amazing work and it just is. It's just ignored. That's it. It's so basic and so absolutely essential. So thank you very much. And obviously your presentation will make available to people. And thank you very much for that. All right, then moving on to Anton Harber. Anton, you have obviously had huge amounts of experience in terms of fundraising, both from both sides as a funder and obviously, getting funding. So please, over to you for some very practical inputs on that. And also, if in your presentation, if you can just touch on some of the corporate issues as well, because, that is actually an area which we as AIP have started to look into. And as the kind of funding environment becomes more challenging, we need to look at a whole lot of different sources. So thank you, Anton.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm not going to run through the issues that people have been through systematically, a whole range of issues. I'm going to highlight a few things that I think arise from what's already been said. Let me say, as you indicated, Kate, I can speak both as a fundraiser, having been snubbed by more grant-making organizations than is good and proper over about 40 years of this work, but also having had some successes. So I do know the difference and have learned a bit about what makes the difference. But also as I run the Henry Nxumalo Foundation, as you said, it gives out grants. It gives out grants for investigative journalism. If you want to know more, I've put the link in the chat group. Let me say on what Bongiwe said, that we don't have a deadline problem because you can apply to us at any time. But I'll talk to you about the kinds of things we look for and the errors we see from applications we get. So I would say the first thing is we see applications that lack preparation, that haven't been thought through, that haven't been properly researched, and particularly that's journalistic applications that are just not properly researched. When you're applying to an institution, I mean, the first thing to do is know as much as you can about them. How do you fit with them? What do they usually find? Who do they usually find? What will they not find, so that you don't waste anybody's time, including your own? What are their requirements, and can you meet them before you even start? I would recommend, wherever you can, don't go in cold. If you can talk to someone, if you can pick up a link through a mutual contact or networking. Nadine spoke about the value of networking. You know, people get a lot of funding applications. If you recognize the organization or the name from whence it comes, you're halfway across the first hurdle. You're already being noticed. So it's much easier that way than a cold call, if they've never dealt with you at all before. You know, we find, you know, we give grants for investigative projects to individual journalists, or groups of journalists or newsrooms, to enable them to go out and do an in-depth project. So it has to fit the criteria of what we broadly call investigative. We don't fund training, we don't fund infrastructure, we fund reporting projects. But I can't tell you how many people apply to us without having read that on our website. But if you applying for a story grant, for a reporting grant, it's absolutely critical that you do the necessary research up front, and so that you're able to be specific and not vague. You know, it's no good writing to us and say, I heard that that laborers are being abused in this factory, or that there's human trafficking going on at this border and I want to go and see, because that's just too vague. You actually have to be able to say, I know this is going on, this is how I know, this is the pre-research I've done to show that my story is doable, achievable, and that it actually exists, and that I can have access. You know, I'm not going in completely cold. I've done my preliminary research. Makes all the difference. The work you do beforehand, and the research you do, and the prep you do beforehand. The more you do, the better. And what you need to emphasize is what makes your application different from others, why it should stand out. As I said, they're weighing up lots of applications. What makes yours noticeable and different in the crowd? Just to give you an idea, when we meet and we discuss an application, that means it's jumped through all the initial hoops. These are the hoops, the questions we ask, and therefore the hoops you still have to jump through. Is the story in the public interest? Does it serve the public interest? Does it promise something that is new or unknown? What will it tell us that we don't know and need to know? And even better, what wrongdoing will it expose? We're talking investigative, so if it's exposing some misgovernance or wrongdoing or crookery, it doesn't have to do that, but that's a strong advantage. You know, people write to us wonderful proposals for soft features that would be valuable, may well serve the public interest, but don't fit into our criteria. So you have to be very aware of that. Then we want to know how will it be done? What sources do you have? What documents might you access? Who might you interview? What might you set out to observe? You need to sort that through and show that what you're proposing is manageable within the time period and the budget that you propose. So often the budget is not realistic. We don't want to find something where you run out of money halfway. If you come to us and say the story's changed, it's got much bigger, I need more time, I need more money, we'll look at that. But if you've just budgeted badly, we'll say, come on, that's your responsibility. And everyone gives themselves too little time, particularly for big projects. We prefer realistic time because it doesn't set us up for conflict. And the most important thing is what's special or innovative or particularly interesting in your application, as I said. We will ask, do you have the skills and knowledge to do this? And if you don't, that's fine. If you're clear about saying, this is the first story I've done involving these kinds of techniques or approaches, then we'll say, well, would you like an editor or a mentor to help and guide you through it? So that's not a hurdle you have to go through, but you do have to be honest in either showing you have the skills and knowledge or saying, look, I would appreciate, we really don't mind sponsoring an editor to work with you. We want to know where it's likely to be published or broadcast. We know that nobody will guarantee publishing up front, but if you can show that you've thought about it, you've talked to them, they've expressed some interest, that if you deliver, they would be interested. We don't want stories that really don't have any outlets and therefore going to have little impact. So that will count strongly against it. And then we ask ourselves, what's the likely impact of the story? Everyone in the investigative field wants impact. Is it going to lead to change or reform? Somebody being fired, some policy changed, something happening. Of course, we can't guarantee and know that, but if we can point towards it, we like to know clearly that this is a story that won't just be published and get lost, that will have some impact. And the last point I would like to make is, be careful of outsourcing your funding application. Yes, you can get expert help and guidance and have somebody look at it, but it needs your knowledge and your passion. A large part of what you're selling to a funder is yourself and your organization, your team, and your capacity to deliver on the grant. So yes, get help, get advice, but you've got to present, you've got to show you have the skills, you have the passion, you're going to deliver on this. So you've got to be able to show that quite clearly in what you present. Let me stop there. I've emphasized a few points. I'm very happy to respond to questions.
Thanks so much, Anton. Excellent. And then just also one thing to emphasize, just from picking up from what you've been saying, which I think is really helpful, is just the point you were making about the fact that if you know you want to do something interesting, you might not have done it before, and you want some assistance, you want a mentor, you want an editor, you want someone to help, just being very clear about that. I think that's very helpful because, when I'm thinking about some of the AIP members I've spoken to, they've sort of said, having like a mentor for a particular, project or issues, etc., would be very helpful. So thank you for that. What I'm wanting to do now, colleagues, is I'm just going to ask the panel one question, which is just again about corporate funding. If you've got any expertise or thoughts on that, I'd love that. I'm also looking at you, Paula. Very happy for you to jump in there as well. So let's just talk to that one very briefly. And then I want all our colleagues on the call to be able to ask their questions. So, Anton, I don't know if you want to just start on saying a few things around corporate, and then please, other panelists jump in.
Yes, sorry that I missed your question originally.
No worries at all. No worries.
Look, with corporates, I would say, as part of your preparatory research, it's absolutely critical that you understand what their interests are. Corporates, all funders act to serve certain interests, but corporates have a defined corporate interest. And you need to fit with that. So that pre-research and that pre-discussion is very, very important so that you understand what particular, do they have a particular interest in education? Well, maybe they could fund me doing work in covering education, for example. Do they have a particular interest in arts and culture? They're going to be more cautious about investigative work, But that's in a sense the role we play as a foundation. We launder their money. They give us money and we stand between them and the journalists. So the journalists they never know to which journalist their money is going, and the journalist never knows which funder's money they're using. It's all mixed. So we're the money launderer in the middle. And where we can help journalists do that, put arm's length between themselves and a potentially problematic funder, we're happy to do that. But corporates, you need very clearly to match their specific interest and aims in philanthropy. Not the company as a whole, but we like that. They always have preferences for they want to give money, and you need to understand that, and you need to be aware that they can be cautious with journalism that can be sensitive. So you need to be aware of and expect. You have to give reassurances, not ones that compromise the work you do or the journalism you do, but be aware that they have sensitivities to protect their brand and what they might be associated with. Whereas some foundations can be more adventurous. Thank you.
Thanks, Anton. I think that's very helpful. I mean, Bongiwe, Nadine, would you want to add anything in terms of that? If you do, please go ahead.
I think I'll allow Nadine to add on to that.
I would just echo Anton. I think you need to be careful of the potential agenda of corporate funders. We have taken corporate money to run reporting programs before, and sometimes we act as the firewall, so the editorial control stays with the journalists and their outlet. But sometimes there are these sort of like soft requests for it would be great if you could cover this, or that does happen. So obviously we know they have their own brand agenda, and I would just say tread a little bit carefully there.
No, thank you. And Bongi, any?
I mean, it would just to echo what Anton and Nadine have said, and it is sort of a dictated approach of an investigation. So I think when journalists are targeted or targeting a corporate funding, they need to be aware that they will be told what is expected of them and how to conduct the research or the report, and what has to be in the investigation. And some have been harmless, and some have been very dictated. So I think journalists need to assess the merits of that opportunity. There are some that are beneficial to the profile of journalists, where they can undertake such a funding initiative. So I think they just need to weigh the merits, the benefits, to see whether this would be beneficial, whether it would contribute to their profession in the long term.
Yeah, thanks, Bongiwe. Yeah, very, very kind of sage advice. Paula, if you've got a thought, would love you to hear, because I know you've done a lot of fundraising, and I think you might have some quite important points. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think that the ethics of funding in journalism might be a completely different webinar. But one of the things that I would say, because I see that there are a number of organizations on the call today, is that if you're fundraising for your journalism as an organization, then really to spread your net quite wide, in the sense that you don't want to be beholden to one particular funder, because when one funder funds most of your work, you're most likely to want to compromise in order to keep that funding. And so I would urge you that if you are dependent on funding for your journalism, then make sure that you actually are trying to get enough funders so that no funder funds more than 40% of your work, so that you have the ability to say no. to push back against requests. And if you from the outset are very, very clear about what the parameters of the relationship are, what you're saying yes to when you accept funding, and make it clear that your journalism is independent, I think it does set you up in a better space. But you do need to be prepared to stand up for your journalism and say no. And I do find that people have a lot more respect for you if you, in fact, say, this is what we will do and this is what we won't do. I also want to say that that all fundraising is relationship building. That very often you might start off with small grants and grow those grants over years as you show your ability to take that grant and create impact with it. Because everyone is looking to make sure that the funding that they give actually creates impact. And so don't think of yourself as trying to get the big grants right off the from the start. Really think of yourself as growing your grant making over the year, being persistent, being trustworthy, showing the impact of the work that you do. And it's probably more important when you are looking for organizational grants, but it's equally important when you are looking for individual grants. If I, as somebody who sits on a panel looking at potential grantees, and I see someone who has a reputation for delivering, they probably would rise above in terms of getting the attention that they want. So I would just add those two.
Thank you. No, Paula, very helpful. Now, colleagues, I see there are like loads of comments and questions and everything in the chat box, and that's absolutely fabulous. Thanks so much for all of this engagement. What I want to do now is just ask for people to put up their hands. Please feel free to talk to a comment that you have put in the chat box as well, and then we'll go ahead. And Paula and Valent and Aaron will assist me with anything that kind of jumps out in terms of the chat box as well. But please go ahead, colleagues. We've got half an hour, and I'd love, or at least 25 minutes, for us to really get into your specific questions. And just put up your hands. I think that's probably the easiest. Yeah. Rumbidzai. Sorry, I butchered that name, but please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kate. You got the pronunciation very correct. My question is directed to Anton, and I just want to find out from you, in your experience in working with journalists, how do you go about protecting identities, let me say, of journalists who are going to be doing pieces that really expose them to probably safety or danger after publishing their piece? When it comes to investigative pieces, especially around mineral resources, sometimes there might be a really good story, but you know very well as a journalist that after your name goes public with that article, you will not be safe or your family will not be safe. How do you handle such situations? Is there room for someone to actually publish an article under a pseudonym? Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Very good.
Go ahead, Anton.
Very good question. We take personal safety and security and the safety of you and your story and your data and your family very seriously. It's not something we will take lightly. So an answer to the first thing I must say is yes, we accept there are situations where the journalist and or some of their sources have to remain anonymous. We published something just this weekend in the Sunday Times here, where the journalist said, I want to continue working in this field. It's a highly risky field. It was about officials on the South African-Mozambican border, corrupt officials facilitating the movement of rhinoceros horn across the border. It went out anonymously, and we would protect that person. Their application to us, let me add, is treated confidentially, particularly if it's a sensitive issue. But we make every grantee, it's something we've introduced more recently because of the growing security issues. We do a formal assessment of risk on every application that we, before we approve it. That involves them answering a detailed questionnaire, providing a bunch of information. We do an assessment of that. And in fact, what we do is we rate their risk between 1 and 5. If it's 5, we say, no, don't do the story. It's not worth your life, and there's not enough we can do to protect you. So our recommendation is don't do it. And if it's a 4 or a 3, we say, what can we do to mitigate the risk? Do you need training? Are there certain tools you need? And if we can assist with that, we will. So it's something we take very seriously, and we work closely with the journalist on those issues. And if they get into trouble, we will again give all the assistance we can.
Thanks so much. Excellent question. Lolita, please go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Lilita Gwabe from Elicha News. I just have a question directed to Bongiwe Tutu regarding the grant proposal, and kind of just looking at how you reconcile the word count with the amount of research that you put in a grant proposal. Sometimes some proposals, there's a recent one I saw that had a word count of 300 words. And so looking at 300 words, including the word count and the research that you do there and all the requirements of that proposal, how do you go about navigating your priorities there? Sorry, I meant to put on my camera. How do you navigate the priorities there when it comes to your word count and the amount of research you put and some of the other requirements that are in a grant proposal?
Thanks so much for that very practical question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Lilita, for that question. That's a very strict word count, Shane, 300 words. But I will say it probably speaks to the 5 W's of journalism. Just make sure you've touched on each of those. So it's the who, what, when, where, how, why. I think, 5 W's and why. If you address all of those in the proposal, then I think you would have answered all the questions that the reviewers would want to assess for the topic or investigation that you aim to conduct.
Thank you. Taseen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you very much, Nadine, Bongiwe, and Anton. I have 2 questions, and I would say that the first is not really a question per se. I would like for the Paula Frey, the Frey intermedia, that they should provide us with samples of proposals they've received in the past, either from the Bongiwe CRP or the IWMF or just from. Sorry? Who's that?
It sounds like there's some noise in the background. Please proceed, Taseen. Okay,
So whether it's from IWMF or from Anton Nxumalo, that they can, or I would like if they can share samples of proposals they've received in the past and they find compelling and irresistible grants proposals that they granted. That's the first one. Now the question really is that anybody can answer me. Would you recommend that someone who works in a private media house, someone who works in a private media house, would you say that they can also apply for grants or that they can pitch their stories, or would you suggest that they should alternatively go for paid fellowship in niches or areas of their interest? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues?
Should I give a preliminary answer and others can add to it?
Please go ahead,
Well,
Anton.
look, whether you go for a fellowship or a grant depends really on what you want. A fellowship can have give you a wonderful opportunity to go to interesting places, get a break from your regular work, meet interesting people. It can be a great refresher, a fellowship. But what we fund is a project. This is a story I want to get done. I need 3 months to get it done, and I need the resources to get it done. So if that's what you want, that's what we do. These are quite separate things. And I should have just mentioned, I'm putting up on the chat group, we did a whole webinar on applying to the Henry Nxumalo Foundation. So I'll put up the link to it because it goes into the specifics of our organization. If you are interested in applying, I should have also said that for the moment we focused on Southern Africa. We've done stuff in the rest of Africa, but for the moment that is our focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that before I move on to the next question? Colleagues? Okay. Let's move on to Ananias. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Kate. My name is Ananias Ndlovu from Naledi News in the Northwest. I just want to check with our panelists as a point of encouragement and for those grant applicants. Do we have like practical examples from our panelists saying to us, this is the project we funded and you can read it here or watch it here? Like maybe like saying to us, staying off on Showmax, we funded that. And we also funded this and this, just as a point of encouragement, because I'm asking this because I've worked with many journalists internationally after the Marikana massacres, and those who were doing those stories, they were funded internationally, but I could hardly get a South African funded production or a funded journalist doing the very same story. You'll get international journalists doing the story in South Africa, funded internationally. So I just want to check if we have practical stories that we do have here at home, funded from home. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Colleagues?
I'm happy to put this link back in the chat, just of some of the case studies of reporting that we funded through our Fund for Women Journalists, which showcase reporting from different regions of the world, just to give a sense of the kinds of stories that we have funded. And yes, I totally appreciate your comment of feeling like the landscape is extremely competitive. I do acknowledge you're correct. So I want to just encourage you that, you do need to be persistent. And there are, as you've heard today from my colleagues, there are so many opportunities. It's just sort of being able to figure out which ones are the best fit for your project.
Thanks so much, Nadine. Any other comments from my colleagues? Otherwise, let's move on.
Just to quickly add that, Kate, thank you for that encouragement. We also do publish all the reports that have been funded by the project on our website. So whatever investigative story that journalists have submitted a proposal to conduct, once that is published, we then republish it on our website as well. And that is to show the work that has been supported by the project. So if you go to our website and you look at investigations or under our reports for training workshops or other initiatives and events that we've held, everything is always published on the website to show the work that the project has done. So if you go there, you will see all the various stories that have been supported over the years. And they range from various topics covering public health. I mean, particularly during the pandemic, the project supported a lot of investigations on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. to journalism and other areas in governance, and also on society. So we do support these topics, and we do target South African journalists and researchers, although that is very challenging. And so at most you will see a lot of coverage on the African continent, but the work is there for you to see what has been supported.
Thanks so much. Brilliant. Let's move on now to a question from Winnie. Winnie, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity. Thank you for leading us, and I really appreciate all the panelists. And my question is, Nadine, when you opened in your opening remarks, you said it's challenging in terms of getting the funding. So where is the role of collaboration with small media houses? Or because I'm from Talk Africa, and we are a small media house, and trying to grow and offering opportunities for journalists to be able to publish their stories. What's the role of collaboration in this whole ecosystem of story grants and finding the grants to tell these unspoken or these untold stories? Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. That's a great question. I do think it's an important point and one we haven't really talked about, but it is true that collaborative reporting projects are getting a lot of attention from funders, and certainly journalism funders like to see when there are, cross-border stories, when there are multiple outlets that are involved in collaborating on a project, and that could look like a lot of things. It could look like a local outlet that's collaborating with a national outlet, or it could look like a lot of local outlets. So, for example, one of the stories or the projects that we funded during the pandemic was a cross-border project across Latin America looking at the increase in domestic violence during COVID-19. So I believe it involved maybe about 19 media outlets, most of whom were very small, working together to tackle that issue from their own countries. So I think it's a really smart strategy for securing funding, because it also shows that there's exponentially more impact when you are able to work together with other outlets. So yes, really strongly encourage you to pursue that.
Fantastic. I see, Fanelo, I see that you can't put your hand up, so that's fine. I will call you after Mfanzile. Mfanzile, please go ahead.
Hello, Kate, and hello, everyone. My question was on what she just responded to, like how we can work around to increase our chances of funding, but maybe just to get more clarity or guidelines on not to go to stories like one of the presentation, it was indicated that some of the standard, like the climate change and others, have been done mostly by most of the guys who applied for the funding. So maybe which other stories which are not highly recommended, maybe, or does not increase your chances of getting funded? Maybe that would be my question.
Thanks,
If you submit a proposal. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Colleagues? So, yeah, please, Paula.
Come in on that.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to say that some stories have a better chance of getting accepted or not getting accepted, for the simple reason that it depends really on the funder or the donor. So, for example, if Anton is looking for investigative stories, applying for funding for lifestyle or for travel is obviously not going to get you noticed. But if it's an investigative story about a lifestyle or travel issue, then perhaps it will. And so you really need to kind of build a large network of different funders and the different kind of issues that they try to raise. And a story that might not interest a donor today might interest a donor in 6 months' time when things change and things come back into the news. And so I would say that if you have a story that you really want to be able to tell, don't give up on it, keep it there simmering, and look at different opportunities perhaps for funding. I will say that a good proposal is like a good story. If you don't hook the attention of the person who's reading it, if you don't make them excited and really get their juices flowing, you're not going to get a grant. And so, and the only way that you can write a good proposal is similar to writing a good story. You really have to do your homework. You really have to find the human interest. You have to find the hook. You have to make them care. And if you can't make the person who's reading your grant application care, it's unlikely you're going to get the reader to care. So, I mean, those things go hand in hand. And I would say that's your homework. That's your challenge in writing a proposal.
Thanks so much, Paula.
If I can just add to that, Kate.
Yeah. Yes,
I think it's also important to follow up on proposals that you've submitted. If you find that the funder hasn't given a response and perhaps the call has long been closed, and it's really important to find out, I submitted this application, can you please provide me feedback on how I did? We always provide feedback on the outcome of applications, and we find that it's very helpful to applicants, because we try to support that they're able to redo what they were attempting in a much more better way. So often journalists will be submitting a whole range of applications and perhaps forget to follow up. And I think it's to your benefit to follow up, find out where you could have improved, and that way you're able to do a much better proposal in your next round of applications that you'll be submitting.
Excellent, thank you. Vanello, please go ahead with your question. Vanello, I saw that you were struggling to put your hand up. All right.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Vanello, fantastic. Please go ahead.
Oh, sorry, man. I'm very tech dummy. sorry.
Right.
Okay. Look, man, my interest, I wanted to, I don't know, mine is a question or a comment. I'm not too sure about that, but I was kind of interested on the question that you raised, Kate, about the issue of corporate funding. It just reminded me of the fact that during COVID, MTN did express some interest in community media. I remember they gave us some smaller funding for communications, or community newspapers who were struggling during COVID times. And I also remember that even Vodacom had a keen interest in supporting community media in the past years. I don't know, I think 5 years ago, we used to go to Vodacom and have those roundtable discussions about the importance of community media in the country. So I was just thinking, maybe is it possible that maybe the AIP office can meet with these guys, because they did show some interest in the past to collaborate and work with community media, and maybe try to revive that that appetite of working with us, and see what kind of collaborations we can do, specifically with MTN and Vodacom, because these are the two companies that did show some interest in working with us in the past years.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanello. You're absolutely right. They did, and they actually did give us a grant, a small kind of amount of money for printing during the COVID period. So yes, point taken. Absolutely. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on corporates. I think we have touched on it, but thank you for that point. Yeah, we'll take that up. I saw that Oratile had put their hand up. Oratile, do you want to go ahead? And then I see, Tosine, that you've got your hand up, but I just wanted to give some more people a chance, but obviously would love to hear you as well. Oratile, would you like to go ahead? Okay, if Oretile doesn't, please, Tosin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I already typed the question in the chat box, and Mr. Hunting has already responded. I just noticed he has responded. Thank you.
Okay, great. If you've responded, that's perfect. Yes, Paul. Paul Mabusa, please go ahead. You're on mute, Paul.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good.
I trust that you're well. My name is Paul Mabusa here from the Voice of Africa, and also I run Women in Mining magazine. Thank you for the opportunity that is being presented to us, and thank you for all the panelists for their wonderful presentation. Look, I noticed that when you apply for any funding, it comes with a huge stack of documentation that one has to go through. That include completing certain questionnaires that takes amount of time, energy, and resources. Now, sometimes as panelists, you decline a particular application on the basis of certain merits of requirements not being met. Now, I'm not trying to create a different approach, but I want to know, when you meet a person who has, say, 5 to 10 pages of a complete stack of application that you, unfortunately, you have to decline, do you completely decline on the basis of the overall application, or you look at the stipend that, or rather the amount of the amount that he was applying for? You've got 3 different amount areas: the beginning and the advance and the way advance. So if a person applied for, say, 900, for example, he doesn't meet the requirement of that particular amount, but he does meet certain requirements of the lower application amount. Do you completely disregard the application, or you downgrade them to the lower amount? Hope I'm clear. I can elaborate if I'm not. Thank you.
I'm happy to try to answer. I'm not sure if I'm getting that quite correct, Paul, but what I would say is when we receive applications and the request is higher than what we could grant, we would look to see if we thought that a smaller grant would help them to accomplish, maybe, if they've pitched a series of stories and we like the series, but we can't fund the whole thing, we might go back to them and say, if we give you a smaller amount, could you do these 2 stories that we still think are very interesting, or suggest that they also are looking for co-funding from other partners or other funding sources. If someone is pitching us a project that's just so far out of the ballpark of what our sort of parameters are, like, that we don't think that any funding would be meaningful towards them getting to that their goal, we would reject it. But we are happy to sort of negotiate on the cost if we think that we can't give you the full amount, but a smaller amount would still help.
Thank you, very helpful. Paul, are you happy with that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay, super. So I've just seen a question. I've been alerted to one in the chat box. This is our last one before I ask Paula to wrap up. So it says, please tell us the steps that follow once a funding proposal goes through after it has met all set standards. This is in terms of communicating with the applicants and how the funds are dispersed. From Maureen or Kenny Maureen. Colleagues.
So I think I'll speak to the previous question as well to add to Nadine's response, and then I'll also respond to this last question. Within our project as well, we do provide suggestions if we find that there are some particular aspects of a proposal that can be supported. If a budget is too high or perhaps can be given an increment of some sort, we do communicate with the applicant in the suggestions when we see that there is great potential in what is being proposed. So proposals are not just rejected based on some particular aspect of what is being proposed. If there is support and suggestions that can be provided to the applicant, we do communicate with them to find a way that they can still be supported. And then to the last question on the process that goes into from application to publication. We do communicate each step with the applicants. So once we receive proposals, we acknowledge that we have received your proposal and it will go under review. And then we stipulate the time or the period which it will be reviewed and by when they can expect a response. And then a response is given to the applicants that congratulations, your application has been successful, or unfortunately, it hasn't been successful based on these aspects which you can, improve on. And then once an application has been successful, we then communicate how the payment process will go. Often we provide payments on an 80-20%. So the first tranche is for the journalists to be able to commence with their field work. And then the final tranche is once the publication, once the report has been published. But all of these steps are communicated clearly with the applicants and the journalists so that they know and so that we can also receive what is expected on a timely basis to ensure that the reporting series is completed adequately. And then I also saw a question on from Tosin on whether the same pitched story can be published on multiple platforms. We have had incidences where journalists have attempted this, and I would discourage against it. If your story has been accepted by one publication, it is important that you publish it there and you don't try to get the same publication to another media company or media organization or platform, unless it is going to where there's a declaration that this story was initially or the primary publisher was this, where they do stipulate where the primary primary platform of that publication is. Otherwise, you then come off as a false professional to the conduct that you're expected to meet. So it is important that you maintain the integrity that is expected of you. If you've pitched a story and it's been accepted by one organization and it is going to be published under their support, it is important that you maintain to publish it there. And then it is up to other media organizations who often pull publications where they declare that this was initially published at this source.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you to everybody. I'm now going to hand over to Paula. And Paula, you'll obviously have noticed people are very keen to get all these presentations, resources, etc. So yeah, over to you, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Absolutely. Yes, and I just saw Oratile's comment about perhaps the organizations giving funding should really look at their criteria, because they've been trying for many, many years and still struggling to get funding. And I think that there is really room for a broader range of funding opportunities, because sometimes you're competing with people that are much more better resourced than you are, and you're competing for a small amount of money to do a story that is critical to your readership but doesn't really kind of compete well. So you're absolutely right, and I think we'll explore that some more as the foundation to see how we can and support really funding for individual stories. I want to start off by saying thank you to all the journalists who are on the call today, and thank you for practicing credible and verified journalism that adds values to the communities that you work in. I think journalism is needed more than ever before, and times are really difficult to be practicing it. And so for all of you who are doing that, I want to say thank you and just to pay tribute to the work you do. And then I want to say thank you to our panelists for their generosity. They did not hesitate to agree to be part of this. They've given not only of their time, but also of their knowledge and understanding. So Nadine Hoffman from the IWMF, Bongiwe Tutu from the Africa-China Reporting Project at Wits University, and Anton Harber, who comes to us wearing many, many hats, as well as Kate Skinner and the AIP members who joined us today. I want to say thank you very much. We will be sending out the presentation tomorrow with a link to the videos that you can rewatch it if you want. But we will also be using the presentation to really write a short guide on what to be looking for when you are applying for funding. If there are any other sessions you think would add value to the work you do, and we're not talking here about journalism training, but to the business of journalism, please let us know. For those of you who are in South Africa, the Frey College, or those of you across Africa, I think Frey College is working with Wits University to offer a Wits University course in media management. So look out on their platforms for that. And for those of you who are in South Africa, we have an entrepreneurship program for women who want to start up their own media. And so look out for the fraymedia Foundation social media for that opportunity. Do let us know how we can support your work. But to everyone on the call today, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paula. Thanks so much.
Thank
you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.